Hello and welcome to a discussion on using X-Intercepts and Y-Intercepts to graph. Let's start our discussion with talking about how to find X-Intercepts and Y-Intercepts, and then we'll move into some examples and then into graphing. Alrighty, so using X-Intercepts, how do you find X-Intercepts? What you want to do is plug 0 into y variable of equation and solve for x. Since we're dealing with just linear equations right now, you should only get one value in for x, because a line will only hit the intercept one time. However, that is just one possibility. It may never hit depending on where it is, what kind of line it may be. Alrighty, so how do we find y-intercepts? You plug 0 into x variable of equation and solve for y. And just as before, you may have 1 or 0 y-intercepts, depending on what kind of line you're working with. Alright, so let's move into some examples for this first one. Let's find the x-intercept. So the x-intercept of 6x minus 2y equals 12. Let's plug 0 in for y and solve for x. So it's going to leave us with 6x equals 12 because this term right here went to 0. Divide by 6 to solve for x. We have x equals 2. And they've been broken into 2, 0. Okay, for the y-intercept, let's underline these to keep our attention to what we're doing. Let's take our equation, 6x minus 2y equals 12. Let's plug 0 in for x this time and solve for y. This is going to go to 0, so it leaves us with negative 2y equals 12. Solving for y, you divide by negative 2 on both sides. That leaves you with y equals negative 6, or you can rewrite that as 0, 6. And as you can see, there are going to be 2 points that we gather right here. And we'll be able to graph those on the quadrant plane and have a line when we match the 2 points together. Because all it takes is 2 points to graph a line. Let's look at this next example. So we have 2x plus 4x equals 8. Well, middle terms here, let's add these together. That gives us 6x equals 8. Well, there will be no y-intercept because we only have one variable, x. So to get x by itself, divide by 6 on both sides, so x equals 8 over 6. So the x-intercept is going to be 8 over 6, 0. And that will be just one line, because as you can see, this is going to be a vertical line where it only hits the x-axis one time. It will hit the y-axis no times. Let's continue on. Okay, so I believe we're going to be asked to find the x-intercept and y-intercept then graph. So let's start off. X-intercept. Let's rewrite our equation. X equals negative 3y. For this, we plug a 0 in for the y and solve for x. X equals 0. So that makes the point 0, 0. For the y-intercept, what we want to do is rewrite the equation. X equals negative 3y. Plug a 0 in for x and solve for y. So divide by negative 3 on both sides. And what are you going to get? You're going to get 0. So that makes the y-intercept point 0, 0. Okay, as you can tell, we really don't have enough information to graph because the only points that we know would be that right there. So to this point, we will not be able to graph that example. But if we try number 2, to continue on, what you want to do is build an XY chart, and we know that 0 will yield 0, so we could want to do maybe when x is, let's say whenever y is 1. So what we want to do there is rewrite our equation. X equals negative 3y. Let's plug a 1 in for y and solve for x. And what we have, x equals negative 3. So there's our point. We could graph it right here. We have 2 points, so roughly that is what that line would look like. We could not use the approach of xy axis because we only yielded 1 point using both intercepts. But we should be able to use both x and y intercepts to solve number 2. Excuse me. So let's do x-intercepts. So let's rewrite our equation. Now let's find y and place 0 in it and solve for x. This term right here will go to 0, so I have negative x equals 4, or x equals negative 4. And that turns into the point negative 4, 0. For y-intercepts, take our equation, negative x plus 4y equals 4, plug a 0 in for x, and solve for y. So this is going to go to 0. We have 4y equals 4, divide by 4 on both sides to get rid of everything to get y by itself. We have 4 equals 1, or y equals 1. That becomes point 0, 1. So let's take our 2 points that we have right here and right here, plot these on the x and y axis. So negative 4, 0 would be right here, and 0, 1 would be right there. So what we want to do is connect the 2 points, and roughly that is what the linear model of negative x plus 4y equals 4 looks like. And finally, let's look at number 3, x equals 5. So x-intercepts, x equals 5. So that's all we know, so there's no reason to put a 0 in for y since y is not there, so we just know that makes the point 0, 5. Y-intercepts, x equals 5. If we plug a 0 in for x and solve for y, that does not make sense, so it does not exist. The y-intercept does not exist. So we know that the line will look something like this. Notice that it does not strike the y-axis at all, but it does strike the x-axis at exactly 5, 0, just as we predicted.